Now we're staying with our lead story on the change of guard in Adamawa State, and let's now take a look at how the whole event started. The politics in the state late last year got the attention of the whole nation when the ousted Governor Murtala Nyako changed parties, but his deputy refused to do so. That scenario, some say, began trouble, which not only changed the face of politics in the state, but created more controversy. In this next report, our political correspondent, Sheung Okimbaloye, takes a look at how events unfolded.
In the beginning, he perhaps felt the weight of his tribulation is negligible. But when the opposition fanned the coal, the heat became unbearable. Some would say the trouble began shortly after the governor moved to the APC late last year, while others say his letter to the Northern Governors Forum on Jonathan's fight against terror were the roots of the woes of the former naval staff. When the retired admiral defected to the APC, his deputy, Mr. Bala Ngilari, stayed put with the PDP. That clearly showed the governor was not in tune with the man expected to be his right-hand man. Then it was also clear he was perhaps not on the same page with the majority of members of the House of Assembly. When the unpleasant torrent came, the legislator accused the governor of gross misconduct and financial impropriety. When the probe was opened on him and his deputy, they failed to show up. And when the panel concluded its findings, it was submitted to the Speaker, Mr. Hamadu Fintiri, who eventually was the beneficiary of the office when the impeachment of Governor Murtala Nyako was concluded.
Or shall become known to me, acting governor of Adamawa State,
as the acting governor of Adamawa State.
After the impeachment, the status of the deputy governor became a matter of huge controversy. Whether or not he resigned became a subject of debate. The case went to court, and Mr. Fintiri occupies the exalted seat, but temporarily, as the Constitution stipulates, and INEC fixed October the 11th, 2014 for a by-election. Fintiri was lucky to have secured a PDP ticket and was looking to battle his major opponent, the candidate of the APC. But that election is perhaps never meant to be, as the Federal High Court ruled that Mr. Ngilari did not resign. Mr. Ngilari has now been sworn in and the crown back to his head. Sheung Okimbaloye, Channels Television News.
Well, as already reported, it was a case of change of guard in Adamawa State as the Federal High Court sacked the acting governor, Adamu Fintiri, and directed the president of the Customary Court of Appeal to swear in the deputy governor, Bala Ngilari, as governor. Now, today's judgment has thrown up a couple of legal questions. And to look at this and the judgment itself, I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by the former dean, faculty in the University of Lagos, Professor Oyewo. Thank you so much for joining us on the news at 10 tonight.
Good evening.
Well, we have a decision now on the true occupant of the governorship seat, but what did you make of that judgment in itself? Was it fair, do you think?
Well, the judgment of Justice Adeniyi Ademola of the Federal High Court Abuja on the facts and the issues brought before him, it's quite a straight judgment that declares the law as it is, and one cannot easily fault it. So I believe justice has been done in that particular case.
Well, when you look at what the prosecuting counsel was saying, Festus Kayomo, he called it a constitutional coup. But when you look at it, he did give his letter, his resignation letter, to the Senate, or rather to the State House of Assembly, and it's the same person who then went back to court. So is it a case of using the law to achieve a particular aim, which he knew would happen altogether, or what exactly do you think is going on?
You have to remember that there were many forces at work that brought about the so-called resignation of the Deputy Governor, Bala James Ngilari. Basically, if you look at the facts of the case, what did that letter amount to was an issue that had to be resolved by the court. And in order to resolve this, they had to look at the constitutional provisions. And the constitutional provisions, as argued before the court, Section 306,
So would you say the speaker was too hasty then in accepting
apart from the speaker being hasty, it came out during the arguments that that letter was titled secret, which means it was addressed to the speaker for purposes of the speaker to get a reaction from the deputy governor as to the purport of the letter. But I think because of now we know the ambition of the speaker to step into that position, he didn't wait, he jumped the gun. And we must not forget that the deputy governor, now the governor, happens to be a lawyer. So he must have read the constitutional provision. Having the gun of impeachment on his head, he looked at how to get through the line mine, and I think now he was able to get, and he's still standing on his feet.
Okay, well, speaking of getting through line mines, it's a season of exploiting loopholes. What options are open to him now?
You have to understand that when we come to democracy in Nigeria, the Constitution is the roadmap. The Constitution is both a political and a legal document. So both of them, they read it. Both parties read the constitutional provision to see how do we chart the path to achieve our ends. But it seems the reading of the Constitution by the deputy governor then seemed to have been more in consonance with the constitutional provision. Because what he now said before the court in his sworn affidavit is that he intended to discuss further the purport of the letter he gave to the then speaker, the acting governor, Umaru Fintiri, and upon the interpretation of the section 3065, it now became obvious that Fintiri jumped the gun.
Okay, let's look at the lessons that we're going to learn from this now.
Yeah.
Looking at the amount of money that has been spent to prepare for this election, obviously people have been paid for logistics, etc., etc. What is open to them legally? I mean, is it just going to go like that, well, sorry, no election?
The question you have to ask is, what is going to happen to those who have benefited from the unconstitutional action of the false removal of the deputy governor? Are they going to return the money they used from the coffers of Adamawa State back to Adamawa State? I believe what is good for the goose is good for the gander. So everybody that has suffered any loss will bear the loss. Those that have gotten any gain will go away with the gains.
Professor Oyewo, thank you so much for joining us on the news at 10. Former Dean, Faculty of Law, thanks a lot. We move on now, and the national leadership of the People's Democratic Party is asking the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, to forgive the party and lead it to victory come 2015. The party's national chairman, Adamu Muazu, who offered an apology today on behalf of the party, acknowledged that some members may have offended Chief Obasanjo, but this is the time to forgive everyone and join in giving victory to the party in next year's polls. Alhaji Muazu spoke while receiving defectors from the Labour Party in Ogun State in Abuja. According to him, quote, all of us must beg Obasanjo to forgive us. We need to beg him. He is very prayerful, and we need to ask him to forgive us so that we can also be forgiven. End of quote. In the meantime, the Chief of Defense Staff, Air Chief Marshal Alex Bade, says videos of girls said to have escaped from the hands of members of the Boko Haram sect in May were not those of the abducted Chibok schoolgirls. Air Chief Marshal Bade, who spoke at a meeting organized for media practitioners and security agencies, questioned the covering of the faces of the girls by the media if they were the schoolgirls said to have been abducted. The defense chief also says that there's no going back on the conviction of 12 soldiers who were found guilty of mutiny.
Foreign press, they came in here into Nigeria in May. We want to go to Chibok. We allowed them unfettered access to Chibok. Oman, I don't know if you came that time, but we know that Aisha Sise of CNN, El Bagir of CNN, and I think Adamawa from Al Jazeera, they interviewed supposed Chibok girls that escaped. They were speaking Hausa. And these are girls that were going to write SSCE. Those ones cannot be those Chibok girls. And they didn't show us their faces so that we would know. Certainly, those were not the girls that were taken from that school. I think we did shine our eyes. When we took the oath to become soldiers, we didn't say there's anything like constructive mutiny. Your own is to first obey. We took oath to defend Nigeria with everything we have. I have not heard of any American soldier turning around to run away from Boko Haram. Our own, people will jump out of APC because we want to donate APC to Boko Haram. You run away. And yet, we condemn those people to death. We didn't make the laws. The National Assembly made the law. It's there in the books. People are saying, no, you cannot do that. Why would we do it? In fact, maybe you will not push us to go and start doing field commercial in the bush. We try them. In 5 minutes, we would have been trying them, kill them, bury them, and we'll go on with the fight.
In the meantime, 4 African leaders, including President Goodluck Jonathan, have agreed to step up the fight against Boko Haram with an additional battalion and a command center to tackle the insurgency. The other leaders in agreement with this plan are the presidents of Benin, Chad and Niger. Boko Haram's recent activities and campaign for a caliphate has placed thousands of people in West and Central Africa in fear, forcing some to flee their homes and relocate to neighboring communities. In the past 2 months, Boko Haram has progressed from bombings, raids and kidnapping to trying to seize territories in remote areas near Cameroon's borders with Nigeria. The 4 heads of state, after the meeting in Niger's capital Niamey, agreed that a new command center will enhance the war against terror. The multinational force would be headed by a chief of staff to be announced on November the 20th. The Niamey meeting is a follow-up to a May meeting in Paris, where the leaders promised to improve cooperation among the countries. The Presidency has rejected an online publication describing President Goodluck Jonathan as the 6th richest African president with an estimated net worth of $100 million. A statement signed by the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ruben Abati, condemns the inclusion of President Jonathan in the publication titled Africa's Richest President 2014 and calls it another attempt to incite public disaffection against him. The statement also says that the President has held public office since 1999 and has regularly declared his assets as required by law. The Presidency is, however, demanding a retraction and an unreserved apology from Lifestyle.com and all those who have reproduced what it called an offensive article or face the courts of law within and outside Nigeria. Well, in spite of the challenges they face, women have been asked to take the initiative to harness their potentials to achieve set goals and objectives if they desire to attain leadership roles in society. This was the theme of discussions at the Sun Women Leadership Summit 2014, which held in Asaba, the Delta State capital. Our correspondent Ayotunde Balogun reports.
Women Leadership Summit, truly.
It's often said that it's a man's world. Yet there have been several calls the world over for more active participation of women in global affairs for the betterment of society.
There will be an array of women.
This has led to the coming together of all parties concerned at the Sun Women Leadership Summit 2014 in Asaba, Delta State, organized by the Sun newspapers.
It should be a summit for us to exchange ideas and galvanize our thoughts on how best to seize the tide in contributing to nation building. In the world
Chief host of the event, Dr. Emmanuel Uduaha, who declared the three-day summit open, urged women to take the initiative to further advance their cause in leadership positions.
So for women to win in a man's world, first, they must continue with their innocence. Two, the women must agree that working together, they have to win.
Advocate for women's rights.
Mrs. Evelyn Oputu, the keynote speaker, a woman who has distinguished herself in the corporate world and in other capacities, and has also served as a former MD of the Bank of Industry, bared her mind on women leadership.
For those who are building careers in a man's world, because indeed it is a man's world, one of the things I'm going to say is that the first thing you do not become a banker because you saw Evelyn Oputu. She comes from Delta. She did banking. She rose to the top. I can be a banker. No. You think about what gives you pleasure, what gives you satisfaction.
Stand up to remember this woman of courage.
A minute silence was then observed for Dr. Stella Adadevo, Mrs. Remi Oyo, and Dingba Igwe for their selfless service in their respective careers of health and journalism.
May their souls rest in perfect peace.
It is hoped that at the end of this summit, women will have made their voices heard as they seek equal participation in leadership and governance to move Nigeria forward.
The Executive Governor of Delta State,
Ayotunde Balogun, Channels Television News.
When the news at 10 returns, the Nigeria equities market resumes on a negative note after a two-day holiday to mark Eid el-Kabir. That's on Business News. Please join us again.